We got David Senra coming on the show. Going to ask him about Nvidia. Going to ask him about Jensen Huang. Going to ask him about great founders. I'm going to ask him how he's doing today. How are you doing?
What's going on, brothers?
Looking fantastic.
Oh, amazing. Look at this. Look at this.
Professorial, if I might say
I honestly,
so myself.
99% of the time that I see Senra, he's got the black founders tee on.
Yeah,
It's good to see you in it's good to see you in a jacket.
that's great.
I know people say I shouldn't wear my own merch. I completely disagree.
Yeah.
Yeah, what?
It's the greatest merch in the world. It is honestly like one of the most comfortable t-shirts
to work to work out in.
Yeah.
If think about how important that random me and Jordy ran into each other after not talking for like 6 months.
True, yeah.
At gym in Malibu.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you would have recognized me if I didn't have without the founder shirt on. So
Well, now that you're doing video, you're a lot more recognizable. You're going to get stopped on the street all the time. I'm sure
let's
it's a
hope not.
dream that you've been waiting for.
no, let's hope not. Please don't.
Famous.
Yeah, he only wants to get recognized in the Aman.
Yes,
That's the most common place that it happens, I'm sure.
Anyway.
Our friend Justin Mayers told me he's opening the new factory for Kettle and Fire, and he texted me last night. And he texted me where it is. I was like, "Is there a Mon in that city?" It's like Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I'm on Lancaster.
Yeah.
I'm on Castor.
Yeah.
One of the most historic locations.
The caster.
The Castor. That's great. Well, what was the last episode you dropped?
Oh my God. It's the episode's actually going kind of crazy.
Okay.
Most people like it. Some people are very upset. It's Todd Graves, the founder of Raising Cane's.
Okay.
So Raising Cane's, this guy's been running his business for 30 years. He owns over 90% of it. It's worth at least $10 billion. And he truly believes that God put him on earth to be great at making chicken fingers so he can help other people.
Life's work.
And so a lot of people love his approach. He's essentially what I would describe as, I did this episode on the founder of In-N-Out a long time ago, Harry Snyder.
Yeah.
And it's essentially like Harry Snyder's reincarnated, but instead of making hamburgers, he's making chicken fingers. They have like the very same philosophy, but people are like really upset that he feels this is his mission. But he like does a ton of good for the community, like gives to charity, like let the guy make his fucking chicken fingers.
It's funny.
Yeah, so he basically just was building the company while he was still in college, right?
No, so there's an interesting thing that reoccurs throughout the history of entrepreneurship. Is like these founders write a business plan in business school about their idea, and they get terrible grades. So like Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx, C-.
Yeah.
Todd Graves, lowest grade in the class. Phil Knight for Nike, same thing, bad grade. Completely disinterested.
The professors don't know. The professors don't know. I remember in college, I wrote a bull case on Twitter at like 1 billion and they got like a B-. And they're like, just because he like disagreed with me on the valuation. And it's like, I was completely right. Yeah, I was completely correct.
100%. But the crazy thing about Todd Graves is like no one would give him money. So he never raised again. And so he raised from, he actually, to save money or to make money, he worked as a Boilermaker. And so they do these fucking crazy things where you have to work like 5 or 6 weeks because you're fixing a refinery. And every day the refinery's down is like very detrimental to the health of the company. So they pay you a ton of money, but you just have to work like a dog for like 100-hour weeks, 6 weeks straight. So he meets a bunch of Boilermakers. Then he risks his life doing commercial fishing. Do you remember this show like Deadliest Catch?
Deadliest Catch, yeah.
That's what he did. He did that
awesome.
when he was like 23.
Legend.
And then he goes and he borrows money from his bookie and then a Boilermaker named Wild Bill. So he never talks about this anymore, but I know I love the idea like there's some Boilermaker named Wild Bill out there that has like a couple $100 million worth of Raising Cane stock, or his bookie made like $100 or $200 million just because his kid wouldn't shut up. His 23-year-old kid wouldn't shut up about wanting to live a chicken finger dream. That's what he repeats over and over again. Chicken finger dream.
Chicken finger dream.
And those guys have the 10% of Raising Cane's?
No, he never says the percentages. Who has the rest of the he says over 90%. But he said he rolled him into the main company because they just invested in the first Raising Cane's. Another thing that's interesting, he had a co-founder who quit after the second store.
Ooh.
Oof.
Miss.
No conviction.
There's always a story like that with like all these power law companies.
No, it's interesting. It's funny. Restaurants and CPG are so tangible that it attracts people that have dreams, but not necessarily extreme conviction.
Sure.
They can see the idea in their head. And there's a sandwich shop in LA, and I've sat down I'm blanking on the name right now, but they've got probably 20, 30 locations around the West Coast now. And he was just telling me how the first year he had been a successful restaurateur. He had multiple locations. He had done nightclubs and all this stuff. And then the first year of his business, he went into massive debt. He was working 14 hours a day. He went into this business like knowing food and beverage really, really well. And it was just the most devastating like couple years where it didn't matter that they were making a good product and people liked it. He was getting, he was having high schoolers sort of like talk smack to him, saying like, make my sandwich faster, like getting angry at him. And so it just like, it weeds out the people that don't have that like ridiculous, didn't have, maybe the co-founder didn't have the chicken finger dreams.
Listen, I think the episode's like an hour long. So if you listen to it on 1.5x speed, you can get it in 40 minutes. It's exactly that. He almost lost. So he was like heavily geographically concentrated in Louisiana, and he almost lost everything in during Hurricane Katrina because it knocked out 21 of his 28 restaurants. And it was all personal debt. So no one would lend him money. So he'd have to go find like an angel investor. He had a very interesting way to finance each individual store. Where he's like, hey, invest like 200 grand in this. He would take that. He called it an angel investment, but it's really an angel investment. He's like, give me 200 grand. I will fill out a 1-page contract. I will guarantee you personally that I will pay you back your money and 15% interest. He would take that contract to the bank. The bank would loan him like $1 million to give him the startup money. And he did that all the way up until the first 28 restaurants. And he was like, we're rolling. We have so much cash flow. Nothing's going to go wrong as long as I don't lose out on any day sales. And then Hurricane Katrina comes and knocks out 21 out of 28 restaurants. And so he talks about, he says this over and over again. He's just like, don't do the things I did because they were wildly reckless. They just happened to work out for me, which I thought was also really funny.
Now, he's still alive. Are you planning on doing one of those episodes where you go sit down with him, have dinner, eat some chicken fingers, break it down?
So I said on the episode, if anybody knows him, please, I would like to meet him because I'm obsessed. Like you guys know this because we talk all the time. Like I'm obsessed with people that do one thing. The only thing I'm really interested in is like, I'm not interested in your stupid fucking startup or your latest company. I'm interested in your last company. Like the thing that you were going to do until that you thought you were put here on the earth to do, and the thing that you're going to do until you die. And so, I'm fascinated by talking to people like that. Most of the most interesting, like unknown founders that I've met recently, the most impressive ones are all in like their 70s. And they've been building their company for 40 or 50 years. You just talk to them, it's like the level of detail they know about the world they've built is like it's one of the most unique experiences you can have in your life because that compounded knowledge, there's things that they know that they can't even really explain why they believe what they believe, but it's just like a very like deep sense of intuition. Jensen is the same. I would imagine the same way. Like I think he's the longest running tech CEO, if I'm not mistaken.
My question is, do you think that these founders who wind up running their companies for 40 years know it's their life's work in the first month, in the first decade?
No.
Do they fall into it? And because I feel like a lot of it's just luck. Like no one ever made them an offer they couldn't refuse. They never wound up being in a situation where they had to, pay some bill and they wanted to cash out or something.
So I don't think they know it that early. Yeah, that is separate from like Todd Graves, right? It was just like, he's been offered billions of dollars. Yeah. And he's like, I never thought of it for a second. What I also love about him is he talks about the need. We need more founders and we need more entrepreneurs to not sell their company. Yep. And so he's like, I'm competing. The reason he's like running through the QSR industry right now is because like he's competing against these very old corporate run businesses. There's no founders competing against him. And he's just like, we need more diversity of thought. We need more ideas. You need more innovation. You need people to actually care. Yep. And so somebody asked him, like, you've been offered billions of dollars. What was the offer that was the most tempting? He's like, none of them. Nothing was ever tempting. He's like, this is going to be a multi-generational business. I'm going to give it to my kids. So let me give you another hilarious story about this. Please. And I'm going to paraphrase this, but so James Dyson, who still owns 100% of Dyson, which I've done 4 episodes on, right? So my number one autobiography recommendation out of the almost 400 biographies of entrepreneurs I've read so far is James Dyson's first autobiography, which is called Against the Odds. Like a few weeks ago, so he still owns 100% of the company. The numbers you see thrown out there, they say, oh, it's worth 10 billion, it's worth 20. I've heard he's pulling out 5 billion a year, more than 5 billion a year dividends personally, from what I hear. Okay. That's amazing. So I was at this like super fancy invite.
What does he do with it? Where's he investing? Does he have a family office or something? Like,
so that's how, yeah. So there'll be hints because like he's been pulling out a ton of money.
Oh, it turns out he owns 5% of Apple now because he's just been building a position for a decade.
No, way better than that. Way better than that. Okay. He's like owns more.
Federal Reserve.
He owns the most sheep than anybody in the world.
I love it. Yeah, you got to be sheep maxing. You have to be sheep maxing.
You run out of things to invest in. So he's the largest green pea producer in Europe. Like,
it's amazing.
So there's
true
a funny
wealth.
story about this there. So I'm at this like super fancy invite only investor conference. There's like 15 people there, and all of them like controlling massive amounts of capital.
Yeah.
And one guy was telling a story like the more assets under management, they're trying to buy private businesses. And you start out buying $500 million businesses, then $1 billion businesses. Now he's got to shoot really, really fucking high.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to paraphrase this. This is why I love people like James Dyson, like Bloomberg, Michael Bloomberg, like Todd Graves. Steve Jobs is obviously is similar though, even though it's a public company. They approach Dyson to see would you be interested in selling, and the response, I'm paraphrasing, was, "Fuck you. This is a family heirloom."
I love it.
Like, I'm not selling for any price. So there's actually a really important idea here and I think another way to answer your question, John, is I realized I remember exactly where I was. You guys have both met my wife. I was supposed to be on a date with her at Harry's Pizzeria in the Design District in Miami, right? And I'm not even paying attention to what we're talking about. I'm thinking about founders. And I remember like it just where I was, like the epiphany I had was like, oh, people say if like you love what you do, like you would do it for free.
Yeah.
And I was like, no. There's a different level. If you you can have such a deep love for what you're doing that people couldn't pay you to stop. Yeah. So it's like the idea has like how much would you have to how much would you have to pay Steve Jobs to not work on Apple or build products? There's no money. You couldn't give him $2 trillion. It didn't even matter.
This was the story of the Zuck acquisition attempt.
Yeah.
They said, hey, here's $1 billion. You're 23 or something. And he's like, but I would just start another social network. This is what I want to work on. Like, what am I going to do? I like this one. Amazing.
That is the perfect example because there's a bunch of young kids that sell their companies, have a bunch of money, but like look at the difference of his life. No one would know his name. Who knows what would happen? It's like now he's like working, the best 40-year-old public company CEO in the world by far. Yeah. Working in the most interesting time, having access to like build some of the most interesting products, and then essentially unlimited resources.
Yeah.
Yeah. Question. Todd Graves, I'm sure, has like an extreme loyalty to his team and employees at the corporate level and the individual restaurant level. There's sort of a broader trend playing out in restaurants. People have been attacking the sort of like one of the biggest cost centers for restaurants or probably the biggest is labor. And so you have, we covered yesterday, Yum Brands, which is like a $44 billion public company. They own KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut. They're trying to integrate sort of robotics on both sides, both on the ordering process. They're partnering with Nvidia to like do like voice models and process, you're driving through the drive-through or calling or texting or whatever. And then they also are trying to integrate robotics on, within the actual kitchens just to produce food more cheaply. How do you think Todd Graves, I haven't found any commentary from him online about robotics, but how do you think he would think about that in a world where I'm sure he has a deep loyalty to his team and loves that it's sort of this human experience going to a Raising Cane's, but at the same time, his competitors are just going to be like trying to drive costs down as low as possible?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd love to ask him that. Based on what he says, like he's pretty anti making decisions just based on financial reasons. Like he talks a lot of shit in his interviews about like PE people, he's just he's not a fan at all.
Whoa. We love private equity here on this show. Okay, let's not slander the good folks over at Blackstone.
Dude, two of my closest friends who I love and I talk to all the time, they are literally might be the most successful PE people rolling up QSRs. Patrick just did an interview with Matt and Alex. Yeah. So I love them too. Yeah. But Todd Graves does not. He is very anti-PE in QSRs.
Timeline in turmoil if they start chirping each other. I have a question about your point about founder control over the long term, never selling, owning 100%. Do you think that there's a need for some sort of maybe cultural shift or even a shift in the way startups are financed in Silicon Valley. It's just so like the standard YC playbook, for example, is like you get 3 co-founders, you split it equally, then immediately YC takes 10%, then it's like back to back to back 20% rounds, you're diluted down to a few percent. Maybe you get some super voting, but you're not paying yourself a good salary. And so, Jordy's kind of talked about maybe we need to normalize some sort of secondary sale so that the founders can take a little cash out of the business and then actually go in it for the really long term. Maybe we just need, hey, it's okay to pay yourself a really like reasonable salary. A lot of founders are out there kind of like starving even after they've raised $20 million. What do you think about the structure of Silicon Valley? Like, is the Silicon Valley playbook setting us up to create the next James Dyson or the next or the next Todd Graves?
So when you say, what do I think about that? I don't think about it. So it's really bizarre to me. Again, like I have an unfair advantage because essentially I just talk to dead people all day. I have one-sided conversations with history's greatest founders, right? So like for like the first 4 or 5 hours of my day, I'm usually just reading biographies. And then I usually have lunch. And then in the afternoon, I like reread highlights of the stuff I read over the last like 8 years while I'm building the podcast. And one of the main lessons from all that is just like they do, like the people that usually get to the top of their profession are the best at what they do what's best for them regardless of what works for other people. And so the weird thing that I have is like when I open up Twitter and people are arguing about like you should raise from this person or you shouldn't raise at all or you should do this. It's just like you should do whatever is best for like whatever mission you happen to be on. So I don't have like an opinion of like how other people should do it other than like what do you actually want to do and then figure out what's the best way to go about doing that. And then this is my issue is like remember when Paul Graham released like the founder mode episode or essay? So many people sent it to me and like asked me what I thought of it. It's just like it was a bizarre reading, and I'm a huge fan of his essays in general, but I just think like it missed something that he obviously knows, which is like it just depends on who the founder is as a person. Like one of my favorite lines, it was this random book on Steve Jobs. I've done like I don't know 10 or 12 episodes on Steve. And it said that Apple is just Steve Jobs with 10,000 lives. And I think like the good news, like one of the best benefits of being a founder is like you get to create your own world from scratch. You get to choose like what you work on, who's around you, how you go about doing everything. And so I would start with like, what do you actually want to do in the world? And then work backwards from that. So like I am like obsessed with control. So, us three talk basically every day, and especially about what's going on with like TBPN. I told you what's going to fucking happen because it's happened to me. It's like you guys are blowing up. Your podcast is going to get a ton of attention. All the people in your audience want to do deals. They're investors, they're entrepreneurs. They're going to come to you with all this crazy shit because they did the same thing. And for me, it's just like I had an insane amount of investment opportunity, people offering to invest in the podcast or I would acquire it. And like, I said no to all of them because the most important thing to me is like control for long term. I believe this is my life's work, just like Todd Graves on a chicken finger dream. I believe I was put here to do this. I think I'm the right person at the right place with the right set of skills at the right time. And like I was watching yesterday, I was watching my son turned 5 and he's obsessed with dinosaurs, right? And so I was like, oh, it's a good idea. Let's watch Jurassic Park. I didn't fucking realize how scary that movie is for a 5-year-old.
Yeah, it's so scary.
I tried to do that once too. I was like, oh, Jurassic Park, dinosaurs. My son loves dinosaurs.
Yeah.
It's dinosaur time. And then I'm like, oh, pump the brakes.
Yeah. But I had the thought because like you see the computers and like everything else. And like, wait a minute, this movie came out in 93.
Yeah.
And like, if I wanted to do what I'm doing now 20 years ago, and you guys too, what would you have to do?
Yeah.
You'd have to go to a physical building and be like, please put me on the air.
Yeah.
It's just so important that like we're doing this at the right time. So again, for me, it didn't matter. Like the money was not what I'm optimizing for. It was the control and the long-term control because I want to do this until I die. And so for me, it's like control is way more important than money.
Yeah, I think the question maybe you were getting at it is at a high level is, are we losing the like true generational founders because they do 4 back-to-back rounds and then they own 10% of their company and they've got a big board and somebody comes and says, hey, you're experiencing all this like craziness. We'll just buy the company. You'll do an earn out, and then you're going to be like worth $100 million.
You get the
but the question, when you look at the Mark Zuckerberg example, it's somebody who maintained extreme control despite doing a bunch of venture rounds, and I feel like many founders aspired to that path over the last 20 years, 15 years, whatever.
I know a guy with 8 board seats. Wouldn't recommend it, but it is a path to control.
Yeah, that's
Little
one
silly.
path.
No, I think like the main thing is like you find something you want to do. Like again, I don't think you could pay Zuck to not work at Meta, right?
Yeah,
He's got all the money. I just admire people that do things for a very long time. Some of these people, I talk to a lot of PE people. One of my friends has the funniest lines. I think that's just like he says, VC gets all the attention, PE gets all the money, and his whole point was just like VC's so loud. Most of like all the media is obsessed with like fundraising, everything else. So to a founder, it looks like this is everything that's going on. I have a weird like vantage point in the founder like, ecosystem because it's like, yeah, a lot of tech people listen to the podcast, but a lot of people like that have billion like multi-billion-dollar family companies listen to the podcast. So like there's just a ton of businesses out there. Some of them raise money, some of them don't. I don't think you're losing anything. I just think there's a
I think one of the
there's like a what's the word I'm looking for? It's like there's just a lot of noise that doesn't exactly represent like everything that's going on.
Yeah. The next Todd Graves or the next James Dyson might be quietly building out there some behemoth that we're just not even hearing about because there's no VCs chattering about it.
So I just tweeted this out where it's just like I had
Midjourney's kind of like that, no outside capital. People know about it, but Midjourney could become some behemoth that David Holes just owns.
If you're not raising, like there's a reason that you have to be loud if you're constantly having to raise money. Like, so I just did this tweet. It was like I had dinner with one of the wealthiest people in the world, and his family has commissioned 2 biographies. It's for the family use only, right? And I was like, dude, and we got along. Like we had a fucking fantastic dinner. I thought he was charismatic, smart, great storyteller. I'm gonna hang out with him again in the 70s. And I was like, dude, let me get those biographies. Like I would do such a good job. He's like, absolutely not. I have no interest in educating my competitors. I've met a ton of founders like this where I get to go to their company offsite. I've toured their warehouses, gone to their company, and they're usually all family-owned businesses. And I'm always like, you're so fucking talented. Why don't you write an autobiography? Why don't you do something? And they're absolutely not. They're just very, very quiet because there's no reason to make noise. There's also, it's also dangerous where this is something Charlie Munger said that was fascinating, where he thought it was against human nature for him and Warren to be so wealthy and so loved. And his point was that there's that greed doesn't run the world. Charlie has a great line. He says, greed doesn't run the world, envy does.
Yeah.
And so when you're really wealthy, there's a lot of envy. And so it's actually smart to not advertise that.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Yeah. So I think it's just.
Can we flip it over to Jensen? I want to know, I mean, obviously he's in the news. He put on the Super Bowl of artificial intelligence, made a bunch of announcements at Nvidia GTC. And I wanted to know, where do you see gaps between Jensen's archetype as a founder from maybe the other Magnificent Seven founders, the Steve Jobs of the world, the Zuck of the world, whoever else you've studied? Where are the similarities and differences?
I think they're more similar to each other than they are to like, obviously they're more similar to each other than they are to like the general population. I don't think there's a single founder that I've covered that is like the only one. Like he's got a lot of interesting ideas. Like they're all usually, what would be considered like micromanagers. They're obsessed with the details. Yeah. Like the Todd Graves example, right? He's got 50,000 employees, 800 stores. He's opening like 100 stores every year. And before he does the interview, like he interrupts the interview so he can approve the Instagram reel that's going out.
Wow.
Same thing with Steve Jobs did the same thing where like there's a great book called Insanely Simple, which talks about this. And it didn't matter if it was like a billboard in Missouri or a full page ad in the Wall Street Journal. Steve Jobs would approve every single ad before it came out. And then he'd be calling up. So the guy that wrote this book called Insanely Simple was the guy that was actually running Steve Jobs ads. And he says, Steve would call me at fucking midnight. And we'd be debating for an hour over a single word. So
doesn't feel like that's happening anymore at Apple.
No,
it's been a little messy lately.
No. So I think Jensen's the same way. What I thought was most interesting about him, he is definitely one of the more extreme. Like he is, every single person I cover on Founders is hardcore and extreme. Yep. He is, and he's unusual. He's uncommon amongst uncommon people. One of my favorite things that he said was that he likes to torture people to greatness. I thought that was like a really interesting line. And his whole point was like, people kind of like clip through people and fire people really fast. If he felt somebody had potential and they're just fucking up, like he's just going to torture them into greatness. He's going to make them great. And what you realize is the longer you read this book, there's a book called Nvidia Way by Tay Kim, which is the one I did the episode on. What you realize is he does that to himself. He's tortured himself to greatness. Where there's a great story in the book where they had won a blowout quarter. They absolutely fucking killed it. And he comes in and he tells his team, he's just like, every morning I wake up, look in the mirror, and I say, you suck.
I love that.
The manifestation or visualization.
Something odd. How do you square his micromanagement with his he's stated that he doesn't have one-on-one meetings very often. He is a very like kind of scattered organization. It's an interesting thing. It's like kind of like you just dive into a specific thing. How do you think about it?
Yeah, he's got 60 direct reports, I think, in the book.
Yeah,
I think when they start writing the book, it's like 30, and I think it goes up to 60 because the book just came out. It's like it covers stuff up until like the recent last few months.
Yeah.
He actually has a great way to describe this. That is most interesting, where people are saying like, how are we going to handle all these agents when they're smarter than we are? And he's like, I'm already doing that. He goes, my 60 direct reports are agents. They're all smarter at what they're in charge of than I am, and yet I'm able to direct them. There's a great line. Let me see if I can find it. He has this line where he says something about the company has to be like an F1
pit crew, probably.
Well, he's describing the way like he organizes it, and essentially like nobody he believes the founder or the leader should design the company not for like what's necessarily best like after they leave, but literally what's best for what they're doing now. He says, ultimately my e-staff, which is his direct reports, ultimately my e-staff is something that I have to know how to work with. The company's organization is like a race car. It has to be a machine that the CEO knows how to drive. And so if you think about it, it's like he made an F1 organization that is tailor suited to him and may not be, it's obviously not going to be tailor suited to the person that takes over after him.
I have a totally separate but somewhat related question in that a certain high profile investor sold a huge stake in Nvidia in 2019 that would be worth $160 billion as of last year. That person is Masayoshi Son. You haven't done an episode on Masa?
No, I won't. I fucking won't. So this, I sometimes I get sad because I feel like the great thing about podcasting is like you actually know the person. Like when people meet you and you guys and me, they're like, "Oh, I feel like I know you." It's like you've heard me talk for 100 fucking hours. You do know me, right?
Yeah.
And so I had so many people that listen to the podcast. Like, there's this new first English biography of Masa called The Gambler. You have to do it. It's gonna be a great episode. And I started reading it, and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." He's kind of like nutty. And then this happened this week. This was supposed to be the next episode of Founders. And listen, rule number 2 in the Senra family is mind your own business. So like, I don't care what other people do for a living. I don't care how they do it. It really doesn't bother me. I wind up fucking hating this guy halfway through the book.
Oh no.
Like I found it disgusting. Like, and it's like, so we have a bunch of mutual friends. We've spent a lot of time together. We're like legit friends off camera, right? We talk all the time. I'd be very concerned if I like ran into people and like, Coogan's a fucking liar. He's fucked me over. The entire book, the first half of the book, is all these people that Masa did business with. That is like, that guy lies all the time. He screwed me over. So then I fast forward and I read the last chapter, and it's like he's super depressed. He's like, I've wasted my life. He says I have an ugly face, which is kind of weird. And he's just like, and would you realize like he was just so obsessed with. He is a legit gambler, and it's like a sad existence. He didn't build a product that made somebody else's life better. He didn't do any of that. And so I was like, I don't give a fuck about sunk cost of spending half a week. If I'm going to make an episode on this guy, that means I have to live inside his world for like another 40 hours. And I'm just not willing to do that. So I just threw the book across the side of the room. I was like, I'm not doing this.
Crazy.
Wow.
That makes sense.
Let's, I'm glad that you have a beautiful face, and it's always great to have you on the show. Thanks. We'll have to have you back soon. This is fantastic.
It's great seeing you in a jacket. I'll say it again.
Appreciate it.
Now that you set the bar, make sure, hey, this summer when we're doing this live in person in Malibu.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, seriously, we still have to do the GOAT debate, the greatest entrepreneur of all time. We have a bunch of, we've been debating it in a chat room for a while.
Let's do that in person.
We have to.
In tuxedos. If it's the GOAT debate, we have to take it one
with
step
a bottle of Dom Perignon, hopefully. I would love that.
That's right.
Well, thanks for stopping by, David. This is fantastic.
All right, guys.
Great to see you.
Always great chat.
We'll talk later.
We'll
talk to you soon.
Bye.
Love you.
Bye.
Love you too.
Fantastic.